Hey, what the hell are you doing walking around dressed like Star Wars?
It's Comic-Con, you idiot. We're going to the Javits Center.
Well, you're the idiots, because you three guys would never be walking together.
Yeah, you're his boss, and you two guys are enemies.
Yeah, bite me, Captain Kirk.
Hey, whoa, come on. No, that's Star Trek.
Yeah, that's two different franchises.
Yeah, sorry, guys. She doesn't know.
Nah, it's okay. I'm sorry you have to deal with that.
Let's go.
Oh, hey, come on. It's not worth it, man. It's not worth it. Not worth it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fanzone Debate. We got an exciting match for you to start off this new title picture in the back half of the Fanzone year. This is the first match after that great title match that totally was set up really quick. We had it last week. It was great. Anyway, we got Jacoby Bancroft. He's going up against Robert Castner, and this is going to be a lot of fun. Both players having, I think, in their view, disappointing losses. In the last one that they played, Jacoby was beat by Nazario in a KO. Pretty intense stuff. Nazario went on to challenge for the title. Jacoby, I think, wants to come back and have a really strong game. Robert, on the other hand, he lost to Joe in the same round of the tournament. He was fired up after that last one. He was pissed. So both guys are coming in looking for a win. I think it's going to be really exciting. I've stopped caring about how long these videos are because whoever's going to watch it is going to watch it. So we're going to talk to the judges. We got Mark and Brian here. Mark, welcome. Your mustache looks incredible. How are you doing today, my friend? And what do you think of the matchup?
It should be good. I wasn't prepared to talk. Last time I was here, I didn't talk.
I think
and
you said 4 words and it was the names. Yeah.
But this should be. I'm always in favor seeing Robert and Jacoby in a match. I think Robert's kind of burst on scene the last couple of years. He's been a very good new player. I always like watching Jacoby. Jacoby is just like he's nothing but like I say this every time. He's so pleasant before the match, and then you get into the actual match, and he's kind of an insane person. Like it's really fun to watch.
Brian, how are you doing, sir? And what do you think of this match?
Well, to be fair, even when he's kind, he's insane. Just saying. No, this should be fun. I have had the pleasure of debating both of these guys, and so I know how good they both are. So to see them debate each other is going to be a lot of fun, especially when I don't have to worry about it. I get to sit back and judge them. So works for me.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, so I am not going to talk to the player. No, I'm kidding. We will talk to the players. We'll bring in Robert. Robert, welcome. I think it was safe for me to say that you were pretty pissed after the last one. You made that abundantly clear. But it was pretty warranted. Like you worked your ass off in that tournament, and it didn't go your way in that match. But and this isn't going to be much easier because you're going up against Jacoby. He's the former champ. He's challenged for the title. He's a great competitor, but I think you are as well. What are your thoughts kind of refocusing going into this one?
Yes, Tim, I was very upset. I apologize to Joe because I didn't give him his due for debating very well. I was so in my head because I spend more time getting these notes, and like I watched like the 4 full movies for this within the last 2 days.
Nice.
To get this done, which they late nights. But yeah, my goal here today is obviously to win. But if I lose, it's to be a little bit more conscious of the fact that Jacoby and I have debated before, and he beat me fairly soundly, kind of similar to what Joe did. So if it happens again, it's kind of an expected thing. Also, kind of funny that your top 2 seeds in your tournament got dispatched so easily in the semifinals. I don't know what that means about tournaments or the skill set of the people who get put into tournaments, but kind of funny how that happened.
It's a crazy world, the world of debate. And hey, man, Jacoby once made me watch a Woody Allen movie for a debate, and then I lost. So to be fair, yeah, he looks confused backstage. I had to watch Midnight in Paris. It was a fine movie. It's a good movie. Okay, Jacoby. We bring in Jacoby.
Wow, thanks for just lightening this mood by like saying how both of us just have coming off of devastating losses and then just bringing up Woody Allen for great tone setting for everything here.
This is gonna be joyful, Jacoby. Nazario
spanks me.
Is a Spanish speaking motherfucker, and he got the win. what same kind of question to you, like how were you feeling after that, and now going into this, have you refocused, changed your what's the word I'm looking for,
approach
thank you, to debate, or are we going in just like
I think we're going. It did hurt last time because I think that was like the worst loss I've ever had, like while debating for all these years. So of course that stung a little. As happy-go-lucky as I am, I care immensely about this, and I always want to win and do well, and anything. So then I have to just refocus and try to get my groove back a little bit, and we'll see what happens. But like you said, like Robert was mentioning, it's like, oh yeah, I beat him pretty soundly last time. That's not how I remember it at all. I remember very vividly, like those questions were very neck and neck that I really felt could have gone either way, like regardless. So it's no joke. And he did it last time when he was like super tired and like exhausted from like I think baby duty and for probably duty, but like it's all fine. Like it was crazy. So now that he's probably in more top peak condition, it's even scarier. But the goal is always to try to find the fun in it. So I'm ready to do that. I'm very happy to be here with Robert again, and I'm happy to be here with you, gents.
Yeah, thanks, Jacoby. Thank you, Robert. And let's get into it. This is how it's going to work. So the players drafted categories. We gave them questions based on those categories. They're going to debate those questions tonight before our very souls. So at the start of the debate, each player is going to get 1 minute to open their argument, followed by a 5-minute free-form debate. Then we are going to close with 1 more minute for each player. At the end of the debate, Brian, Mark, and I will write on our handy-dandy boards who we thought won the debate. 2 out of 3 votes will win you a point. First player to 3 points will win the match. Gentlemen, any questions as we get started today on this here match?
No.
No, good luck, Robert.
Good luck to you.
All right, let's do it. Okay, dokay, as I say to Ellie. All right, we're going to kick this off with the first question. This was drafted by Jacoby in the category of the MCU. Your question is, which MCU character has the best introduction? Jacoby, because you drafted this, you get to go first. You have 1 minute when you start talking.
Star-Lord, when we see him as Chris Pratt the first time, has the best introduction in the MCU. I think both on a character level and on a wider MCU level. Starting with character, we learn everything we need to know about Star-Lord in an awesome and fun scene. We see him with like this banger song intro, being just kind of dorky and goofy and totally wrecking those little monsters on the planet. And why that's so good is the scene right before when he was a kid. He's telling his mom how he got into a fight because he was protecting an innocent frog from bullies. So in one music-filled intro funny sequence, we learn that space has changed him into Star-Lord. Great little beat. And of course, his whole introduction is showing him as a bit of a weirdo, kind of a cool loser, but also competent when he outsmarts all those Ninja Turtles, as he calls them. It's unlike any main MCU hero we have seen up to that point. And having an introduction like this really, I think, opened the door for the broader MCU, because at the time, people didn't know if Guardians would work. And I think this intro silenced a lot of naysayers, and I think took the MCU to the next level after Standard Avengers.
Done. Okay. Star-Lord, let's move over to Robert. Robert, you have 1 minute to open your argument when you start talking.
When something becomes old hat, it's hard to think about it objectively, with its advent, and remember how truly awe-inspiring it was at the time. So for the MCU and for movies in general, mostly comic book-based movies, post-credit stingers have become second nature to the movie-going public. There were stingers before Iron Man, but that kicked off a trend where everybody now has to make sure that they stay in their seats to make sure that there isn't a post-credit stinger. So for my introduction, I chose Nick Fury, who comes in at the end of Iron Man. He only has 5 lines. He's only in there for 40 seconds. But the resonant impact of what he does, everything you need to know about the character is introduced, even necessarily before he says one line. But what he says to Tony Stark opens up the broader world of the MCU, has changed the face of how cinema and blockbuster cinema works from that point forward. and is an indelible impact for everything after that in such a short time.
All right. Nick Fury versus Star-Lord. Gentlemen, we are going to get into the 5-minute freeform. I will throw up a 1-minute warning when the time comes. If one of you is talking over your opponent, I will throw up the let your opponent talk. Don't make me do it. It makes me very sad to do that. I don't enjoy disciplining you boys, but I will if I have to. Also, Nick is backstage and he might come in and yell at you. So 5-minute freeform. One of you starts talking.
Nick Fury as an answer is an interesting one because I think it really only does one thing, and I think that makes you think about other characters. I mean, there's really nothing really about Nick Fury and more about the future of the MCU and the upcoming Avengers, which is great, and that's exciting for sure. But mine also does that because it introduces characters that evolve the Avengers past into this more cosmic side that the MCU is moving toward in a funny way, but also tells us everything about his character itself in the meantime. And I think those two together make for something as a much better introduction than just Nick Fury talking about the Avengers.
Well, Jacoby, there is an introduction to his character, like I said, before he even speaks. You already know he's sitting in the shadows, and you already know what he is as a person. He's a master spy. He was able to hack Jarvis and hack into Tony's secure house when nobody else really has been able to, or like in a way that makes him seem very competent. He's dangerous. He gets the drop on Tony. He knows he's going to be there by himself to have this type of meeting. He's calculating. He knows Tony's no real threat to him. He does that before he even says his first line. So you get a sense of what kind of, capable genius he can be, but also when he emerges from the shadows, he's Sam Jackson with an eye patch. He's cool. He's suave. He commands a presence. So it's not just about talking about the Avengers. It's about understanding what kind of spy he is, that he's the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D., so opens up for S.H.I.E.L.D. as well, not just the Avengers, and lets us know about governmental impact too. So it's not just about the Avengers. It's also about Fury.
Yeah, but like cool and suave as like the turning points of him, I just think it's a little undermined a bit when like all the heroes, especially like before that, like especially Tony Stark's introduction as the cool and suave guy, and heroes afterwards like Thor, cool and suave. Like Captain America, he's a little nerdy at first, but he's still like kind of a cool guy. What makes mine great is that like Star-Lord is a little bit of a different person. It's not cut from the same cloth. You mentioned in your beginning how it's like it becomes hat trick and it's something that's new, right? Star-Lord is something new for the MCU because he's a completely different type of hero than we've seen in the MCU for that. He's offbeat. He's more dorky than anything he has. And I think it's cool that he's played by like an untested leading man at the time, which makes it kind of exciting and like a breath of fresh air for something that evolves the franchise past what it needs to do. And you're reading a lot into what Nick Fury can do because of what we ensured, like he hacks Jarvis. He does all those things because he has to sit there and wait. But like Star-Lord, we actually see him doing that stuff by being smart, but also being funny and cool and suave and like worth watching to follow.
I think it's funny that you said that Peter Quill doesn't do anything does stuff that's unique, but he's a guy who comes into a place and steals something, very reliant on gadgets, is a ne'er-do-well who knows mechanics and inventions. To me, that sounds a little like Tony Stark in that intro. The first part of the intro, you go right to the music, but the first part is him just kind of trudging along using a hologram thing for the first couple minutes. That's kind of boring. And I want to say this. I once tried to get on Screen Junkie Movie Fights by saying that Come and Get Your Love was the greatest song to ever be put in cinema. I think that scene, what you're talking about that introduces us to Peter Quill, is less necessarily about what Chris Pratt does and about how it's visioned, how it's put into production with the song and how James Gunn writes that in and how that's composed. Less so about how Chris Pratt portrays it on screen. I think it's mostly a product of the music.
But I do think it is everything. This is everything that goes into the introduction of a character. So the music is a big factor of it for sure. So is the direction and James Gunn writing himself. And that plays a part into Chris Pratt's character and characterization of Star Wars being just kind of a dork, but like kind of a loser, but like kind of a dick at the same time for like all these sort of things. And all those elements do morph together into an introduction. And that's what makes my introduction more fulfilling than just Nick Fury, just teasing the Avengers, because Nick Fury himself as a character is kind of lame and moot at that point, because we're not thinking like, man, I can't wait to see Nick Fury again after that. We're thinking, man, I can't wait to see the Avengers after that. And I think that hinders the Nick Fury as the choice there. Well, because mine is all encompassing.
But as I mentioned, it's also about leadership of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's also about expansion of the government aspect. So it's not just about and the heroes go with Nick Fury because he's introducing the Avenger Initiative hand in hand. So it's if you have Nick Fury, you're also going to have the other heroes. So it goes hand in hand. And, the music stuff, whatever. I think everything once he gets introduced to Korath is kind of lame, honestly. Like, his ability to escape is based on luck. They do the Star Wars thing in New Hope.
That's what's great.
No. He jumps on the thing, and then there's like 6 guys next to the ship, and then he builds a cannon, and they let him get away very easily. That's really stupid.
It introduces a new type of character.
Type of character, strike it from the record.
New what?
I think we might have to. Robert, we're going to start with you for closings. You have 1 minute when you start talking.
I think Jacoby's trying to undercut exactly what we're getting sold with Nick Fury. It's not just about the Avengers Initiative, which is the thing that expands out everything and has built out a cinematic universe and has built kind of the test of what blockbuster movies have been from that time. But as I said, we get a full sense of what Nick Fury is before he even says a word, based on his skill set, based on his ability to get a drop on a genius, based on his ability to hack into what's going on there. It's not just about what he promises. It's also about what we see in that time. When it comes to Star-Lord, as I said, Jacoby mentioned how things go in, but we're talking about, we think about what is happening on screen. And I'm thinking about more how it's composed from James Gunn, less about what's happening with Chris Pratt in that moment. It isn't that unique. As I said, there are aspects of it that reminds you very much of Tony Stark. It's an homage to Indiana Jones and Star Wars, but it isn't quite as indelible and thought-provoking as those. It doesn't stand the test of time. It's kind of lame without those James Gunn isms just being Chris Pratt.
Okay. We're going to go over to Jacoby. Jacoby, you have 1 minute to close when you start talking.
I think Star-Lord's introduction is everything that the MCU should be. It tells us everything we need to know and understand about Star-Lord without, a lot of exposition. It does so in a funny, charming, refreshing way. Yes, as Robert said, maybe a little bit Indiana Jones, maybe a little bit Star Wars. I don't think that's a bad thing. It's a character introduction of a virtually unknown character at the time with an actor who had not been tested as a leading man before, which is exciting. And it evolved the MCU to embrace more cosmic goofiness and expansion. It proved that no-name characters, when done right, could be very successful. And again, his introduction is just so exciting on a basic level. The music is great. Robert's trying to knock that. The comedy works. The action is fun. It's so much into the introduction that makes it exciting, but it's also rooted in character in all aspects. Nick Fury does have one thing, and he sets up the Avengers. Robert kept saying governmental oversight. We get to learn about the government. That's not very exciting, but mine, his sets up the Avengers for everything. Mine sets up the future of the MCU post Avengers, which I think is arguably tougher. And mine also gives us a character we get to follow afterwards, unlike Nick Fury, who's nothing.
Jacoby, always right on the edge. All right. Tyler Butler is also backstage. I almost just brought him on instead of Mark. It was
four judges. Deadlock. What do we do at a deadlock?
There.
I got a new board today because I wanted my loss to Jacoby to feel really fresh with a new board. Nobody else gets that except for Jacoby. But it's bigger than my old board, so I'm freaking out a little bit. All right. Good shit, guys. Different picks, both good picks, both painted the picture really well in their introductions as to why these were great introductions for the characters. Totally bought into both. I went with Jacoby. I thought Jacoby, the line that really kind of sold me on Jacoby's was he said something, paraphrasing, but something along the lines of we see Star-Lord in the opening and we want to see more of him and we want to continue watching his journey. We see Nick Fury's introduction and we want to see Avengers. that really kind of sold me on the aspect of why Nick Fury's wasn't as exciting for Nick Fury, the character. I still think Robert did a really good job of kind of breaking down why in a short amount of time, his scene and his introduction really ups the character and ups the universe, given the time that when it came out. And I thought he also did a good job of, kind of saying some of the parts of Jacoby's scene as more the visual and less of the of what Pratt is doing. But I think Jacoby did a good job countering that in saying that, taking what we saw Star-Lord as a kid and bringing it into him as an adult and how it works for the character in the intro. So I went with Jacoby. Brian, your thoughts?
I also went with Jacoby on this one. This is going to sound like a cop-out, but I don't really have a whole lot to say because you kind of stole everything I was going to say.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, there were points back and forth, but really I think that when I was looking for something to break the tie in my mind, what kept coming back to my mind was that line about, at the end of Iron Man, when you see him, you're not excited for this character's introduction. You're excited for what it represents in the future. You're excited to see Avengers. And I think that just kind of tipped the scales for me.
Okay. Mark, your vote does not count. Where would you have gone and why?
Yeah, plain sweet, JB. There were definitely moments where Robert was kind of getting me. I think whenever he was describing Nick Fury's introduction, how all the aspects about it, I think set up that character pretty well. And then there was that point in the match where I think Jacoby kind of exposed his chin a little bit, mentioned he'd never seen a character like Star-Lord before, and Robert just kind of smacked him pretty easily with that point. But I feel like as it went along, and he brought up kind of the other things that kind of the Nick Fury thing kind of brought in, I feel like Jacoby did a good job at least kind of cornering that. Is we get to know about the government side. All right, cool. That's why we go to these Avengers movies, see the government side of things. But yeah, I think just kind of Jacoby just kind of outlasted this one just in general.
Okay. All right, Jacoby gets the first point. So we are going to move on to the next question, which was drafted by Robert in the category of horror/thriller. The question is, what is the best performance by any actor in a horror/thriller film featuring Brian Cox? What a legend. We are going to start with Robert. Robert, you have 1 minute when you start talking.
When someone's so ingrained with a character's portrayal like Anthony Hopkins is with Hannibal Lecter, it sometimes creates blinders for anybody else's depiction and takes away from the quality of those attempts. So, but like the Joker, for instance, there are different elements different actors bring and set up something unique. And that's why I chose Brian Cox himself playing Hannibal Lecter in his first iteration in Michael Mann's Manhunter. From my understanding, Brian Cox took a little bit more from the source material. So it's a little bit more true to what Thomas Harris wanted for Hannibal Lecter. It creates a more realistic tone. Anthony Hopkins, I think, sort of in his playfulness and his wanting to be smarter than everybody, sort of hovers above everything that happens in Silence of the Lambs and all the sequels that go beyond it. But I think there's a cold, calculating nature to what Brian Cox does that gives it kind of a true crime feel. Like you could believe Hannibal Lecter really exists from what Brian Cox does. So that's why I chose him as opposed to anybody else in any other Brian Cox movies.
Awesome. All right, let's go over to Jacoby. Jacoby, you have 1 minute when you start talking.
Jake Gyllenhaal on Zodiac, I think, gives the best performance in a thriller film featuring Brian Cox. Zodiac is about obsession and searching for answers where there are none. And the character of Robert Graysmith that Gyllenhaal plays is the absolute best for highlighting Gyllenhaal's talents. I think Jake Gyllenhaal is great at two things in particular: obsessive intensity and a goofy, boyish silliness. And Graysmith is the perfect combination of those two things, leading to an all-time performance. We see over the course of more than a decade, Gyllenhaal's character character gets sucked into this mystery, develop a fascination, then a determination, then an obsession with finding an answer to something he has devoted most of his life to. It's incredible because we go through all these stages of his life from the beginning and ending of this movie to see how it's been affecting him. And it's one of the best performances of his career because he plays a character that highlights his strengths, I think, so perfectly. It's a complex, nuanced, charming performance that bubbles with like frustration and desperation the more it goes on. And I think it's the best one.
Time. Jacoby being more time conscious. I love to see it. All right. We're going to bring in Robert. Guys, you have now 5 minutes when one of you starts talking.
I liked your summation, Jacoby, on Jake Gyllenhaal. He's my favorite actor. I've seen basically everything he's done. I think the best Gyllenhaal is when he's doing one of two things, kind of like you said, but different. When he gets to slide the emotional pendulum or when he gets to rage out, because his anger and intensity is intoxicating. I don't think he actually gets to do either with Graysmith because he's an avatar. He's observing. He's playing in these different pools. He's sort of measured for a good portion of the film. And then his obsession isn't like the obsession you would get in Detective Loki and Prisoners, which I think is more compelling. It's kind of a milquetoast obsession. Like you feel for the other characters like Toshki and Avery that their obsession, what's going on, is really sort of building them, pushing them down to the limit. I don't get that sense with what Gyllenhaal does with Graysmith because it just seems like he keeps puttering along in life.
I don't agree. I think Graysmith is a puttering of life sort of character. He's kind of stuck and lost at the beginning and kind of latches onto this idea of who the Zodiac is. And the more it goes on, and he kind of like, he starts from the background and then he fully, over the course of 12 years, I think he just fully gets involved with it. He lets it go for a little bit and then it comes right back at him. And you see that because when in the scene where he has to say like, I need to know what it is, that's everything great about what Gyllenhaal can do in terms of excitement, in terms of intensity, in terms of how this has completely wrecked him. And because it's such an expansive time, we get to see that change. Unlike your scene, in your summation of what Brian Cox does is like a more realistic tone. He's very cold, calculating tone. What I read that as, he's just some guy. And I think that's the worst thing you can say about one of the most like recognizable villains, I think, in all of fiction, Hannibal Lecter. Brian Cox isn't bad in the movie, but there's nothing there. But you're right, he is a very realistic. He's having conversations with Will there, but there's just not enough to really delve into the meat of what the most best performance in any of these movies can be. He's barely factored into the story, and he's not doing a whole lot because that's the point of the character. He's supposed to be calm. And that's just not, I don't think, the best performance compared to what Gyllenhaal does.
But you can be understated and you can be playful, and there's a physicality with what he's doing. Like how he's, like when you see Anthony Hopkins playing him, he's always just prone and standing up. This one, he's relaxed. Like he's bored by what's going on. He feels like it's beneath him. Everything sort of, from Anthony Hopkins' perspective, I'm using him as the baseline because everybody thinks of him. Everything feels like it's hyper important. But for Brian Cox, it feels like he's trying to play two steps ahead as an aloof. Like you think of him as a guy who's a psychiatrist who's also a psychopath. I never got that sense really from Anthony Hopkins. He just felt like a guy who was like a supervillain.
But you seem to be basing your performance off of everything Anthony Hopkins is doing and how it juxtaposes against that. In the movie itself, in the standalone movie of Manhunter, it feels like Brian Cox is just regular. He's in the thing. He is not compared to anything that Tom Noonan is doing or William Peterson. In his movie, that as a performance, it's nothing. It's casual. It's calm, and that's fine. But it's just not the best.
I mean, he's able to figure out how to manipulate the phone and get Will Graham's home address and prove how super smart he is by using tinfoil from a thing of gum. And then he uses that as a means to set up a message to put Will Graham in danger. So he isn't hovering above everything. He's like a weed who grows out and comes out that you have to take care of every so often. So it's not quite the same thing, but it does have an impact on what's going on in the story. As it relates to Graysmith, I think I don't think he can play somebody who's kind of like he's like an idiot savant in the movie. Let's be honest. He's like an idiot savant. I don't think how he conducts himself in most movies that finds where you can find him charming. I don't think it plays well to what his strengths are. His obsession, yes, not the way he goes about building out that obsession and what he does as a character. I don't think it fits with what he does.
You called him an idiot savant himself, and which he is. And I said that in the beginning, that one of Gyllenhaal's best talents is playing someone who's goofy and out there and out of control. So now when you play that sort of like goofiness, idiot sort of character, matched with someone who develops an obsession over 12 years of time, where over 12 years consistently, you see him get obsessed and sucked in and locked in, and just how this destroyed his life in a very muted scale. I'm not saying it's one of Gyllenhaal's bombastic performances, but I do think this one is better for that, because all that bombacity is coming from within, because it's eating him up inside over the course of everything that we see, as opposed to Brian Cox, who just in Manhunter is just casually moving some things wrong. You're right. He does pop up as a weed, and then he disappears from the story because he isn't the focal point. And I just don't think that gives Brian Cox enough to play to give a truly great and memorable performance. The best thing we can say about Brian Cox is, as you kind of keep saying, it's like, it's against Anthony Hopkins, and it's different from that. But if there was no Anthony Hopkins and this was just Brian Cox in this movie, we would never talk about Brian Cox ever again.
I don't think that's entirely true. I think he does things in here that make you think about how Will Graham is affected, and he's trying to bring out Will's psychiatry, psychosis.
All right. We're going to start with Jacoby. Jacoby, you have 1 minute to close when you start talking.
Best performance is usually always subjective, but I do think there's a stark contrast between what Gyllenhaal does in Zodiac to what Brian Cox does in Manhunter. Gyllenhaal creates an entire complex character who we understand, who we root for, who we laugh at, who we want to see succeed and find answers because he wants it so badly, but also we don't kind of want him to succeed because he's so much fun to watch when he's struggling, when he loses his family because he is so singularly obsessed with what Zodiac is doing. It's a complete portrait of a character, and it's everything Gyllenhaal really excels at. In my opinion, people might think differently, but I do think the internalness of what's going on behind Gyllenhaal's eyes is great at this. Brian Cox is the third best Hannibal Lecter we've seen in media, and it's because the character himself in Manhunter isn't all the focus or subject to something deeper. He's just some guy, and he's very casual. He puts his feet up in the cell. Yeah, he does trick with the phone, one thing, but like that's it. He vanishes from the story because he's unimportant. He's designed to be unassuming with just a slight edge, and while that's good, that's not best performance worthy. He does it well in a character that doesn't ask for much, but Gyllenhaal's better in every regard.
I'm going to go over to Robert. Robert, you have 1 minute to close when you start talking.
I think if we're not doing something that's hyper realistic, having a logical underpinning someone and the realistic tendency of what's going on is important for what's going on in the story. Lecter looms as a shadow because everything he's trying to bring out of Will is how Will Graham is able to see what's going on with the Tooth Fairy. So without Lecter pushing him in those ways, we don't get to the climax of what happens in the conclusion with the Tooth Fairy. I think with regards to Gyllenhaal, what he's doing in Zodiac, I think there's a bored feeling. I don't think you feel compelled with what's going on unless he's sharing the screen with RDJ, with Mark Ruffalo, with even Elias Koteas, everybody who's involved in the investigation. He feels like an interloper. He doesn't feel like he belongs. David Fincher even sort of recognized this because of how hard he was on him. And he's hard on everybody, but he was especially hard. There are a lot of stories about that because it didn't feel like he belonged. It doesn't play to Gyllenhaal's strengths. There's no intensity. The obsession is milquetoast, as I said. He doesn't feel right for what's going on in the movie over that time.
Okay. We're going to bring in the judges. All right. Brian looks ready. Mark, whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Yeah, this one's pretty close. I think I'm going to lean Jacoby on this one. I like the pick, at least going Brian Cox and Manhunter. I think Robert made a good argument, at least for why I think he's different. I just feel like on some level, Jacoby kind of put him on the defensive for really the majority of this match, trying to make him seem like he's different. And I feel like there, other than kind of the one example we get of him him getting the address and the phone, it just didn't really seem like there was a whole lot to at least kind of separate him from that. I think he threw in some pretty good jabs, at least on Gyllenhaal, but I think Jacoby, for the most part, was able to rebound on those and still kind of make good points on why he is. And I feel like, Jacoby kind of worked. I think he kind of worked this a bit just to kind of get Robert from honestly talking too much about Gyllenhaal's character and kind of at least staying on the one point he had, at least from the beginning of the match.
Okay. I disagree with Mark. I went with Robert. Here's why. Well, actually, I agree with some of the things Mark said, to be clear. I actually thought Jacoby spent a lot of time talking about Hannibal Lecter as a character, not necessarily the performance. And I thought Robert did a really good job of talking about why the performance of Brian Cox is super strong. It was weird because Jacoby was like, and I'm going to be interested to go back and see if it was just in my brain or if this is exactly how it went. But to me, it was like Jacoby was doing a really good job on going performance on Gyllenhaal, why the performance of Gyllenhaal was strong, but then would like exclusively talk about the character of Lecter. Like, didn't really nail in the performance of Cox. And I felt like Robert did a good job of breaking down why Gyllenhaal's performance isn't one of the strongest of the Gyllenhaal sphere, but also of that movie, of the movie Manhunter as well. So it was closer than I'm probably making it out to seem with my description. But I felt like Robert had the edge based on the fact that I think Jacoby just made some mistakes in focusing more on the character aspect of Lecter than maybe the performance. Brian, your thoughts?
I disagree with one of you.
I would assume.
It's you. I went with Jacoby on this one.
That's fair.
I feel like I disagree because I think, well, first of all, I think that I wasn't really sold on either one of their arguments for their person's performance. So it really came down to the attacks, the other person's, which they both had some good points. But I disagree with you, Tim, in that saying how Jacoby was talking more about the character, not the performance, because especially when he started talking about, I think Robert expected Jacoby to attack with, comparing it to Anthony Hopkins' performance of the character, which Jacoby didn't do. He basically said, if we're looking at this as a film, as its own single movie entity, this is what I think of the performance. And he talks about how at the end of the day, if the Anthony Hopkins one didn't exist, you wouldn't be talking about this performance at all. There was nothing special about this performance that made it stand out. And so that's the main decision for me.
Yeah, that's true. All right. So Jacoby's up 2-0, which means Robert needs to hit this next question in order to stay in it. We're going to move on to the next category. It was drafted by Jacoby. I am excited for this question. I like these types of questions. That's why I've been doing more of them. The question is, which crime film that is lower than 60% on Rotten Tomatoes is the best? All right, Jacoby, you get to go first. 1 minute when you start talking.
Lucky Number 11 is a quirky crime mystery film that follows two warring crime bosses played by Morgan Freeman and Ben Kingsley, a hitman played by Bruce Willis, and a seemingly hapless schmuck stuck in the middle of everything played by Josh Hartnett in his 2000s peak. It's delightful, it's fun, and light on his feet. It is the best crime movie lower than 60% on Rotten Tomatoes. One of the reasons for that is that it sits at 52%, and I don't think it's really striving to be anything more than 52%. It's proud of its 52%. And you know what? That's okay, because that's so refreshing. It operates in that space so perfectly. It's a little zany. It's charming with Hartnett doing his laid-back heartthrob shtick, but also while having great chemistry with the beautiful Lucy Liu. And the movie even knows how to sprinkle in a little, Stanley Tucci in the mix to keep things fun. Is it worth being above 60% on Rotten Tomatoes? I don't think so, but I think it is the best crime film lower than 60%. I think it uses everybody perfectly. Its story bounces around really quickly, and it's just a good, fun time, a fun twist, a fun crime story saga overall without a lot of baggage.
Jacoby, my God. Okay, Robert, we're gonna start. We're gonna go to you. You have 1 minute when you start talking.
In an exercise like this, research will unearth many unexpected gems, make you wonder how Rotten Tomatoes got spammed to the point of torpedoing quality films. For crime films, I found it a travesty. Man on Fire fit the bill. It's low in the 30%, but it was ecstatic for the sake of this debate because I think it's the perfect version of the movie it wants to be. What I mean is it's not trying to masquerade as something profound and thought-provoking. It's telling a revenge story wrapped in an investigation, buoyed by strong performances and relationship dynamics, specifically with what's going on between Denzel's John Creasy and Dakota Fanning's Peta. Without that, you don't truly believe the lengths to which Creasy will grow because you're introduced to him and he's just a down and out guy who has no connections to anybody. He's trying to find his place in the world. But through Peta, through Dakota Fanning, he finds someone who makes him want to live again. When you read the reviews, the most consistent themes about why it doesn't do well, it's too violent, it's too dark, it's long. The length is there to give you background and the violence is there to make you have a good time. And that's what Man on Fire does.
Okay. I've seen both these. Whoa. 5 minute freeform when one of you starts talking.
I think the most egregious thing about Man on Fire is that I think you can tell in every scene and performance that it's aiming for something prestigious and artsy. I think it's trying to be about redemption and revenge. You said it's like not masquerading as something, but I disagree in the slightest. It's trying to be this hardcore like evaluation of faith and redemption, which is just nuts. Which is nuts for Tony Scott to do because Tony Scott has made some of the most enjoyable blockbusters like of all time with Denzel Washington at its center. But this movie has none of that fun energy and replaces it all with dour cynicism, which is not a great fit for Tony Scott and not really great for Denzel. I just think it's a complete misfire of a movie that's trying for much, as opposed to Lucky Number 7, which knows exactly what it is and it's fun and light and enjoyable and is proud of everything that it accomplishes.
I find it funny you say that, Jacoby, because when I rewatched it, I found that it wanted to be half-baked. It's a half-baked version of other films, including one it discusses directly in the course of the movie, which is North by Northwest. But it wants to be a Tarantino film. It has snappy dialogue. It has a bunch of violence. It has stories that go in and out of time, sometimes well. But the point is that it doesn't have what those movies have. And there's a main point to that. The difference between our two movies is that my movie's buoyed by a good performance by Denzel Washington, and your movie's buoyed by Josh Hartnett in the 2000s. No offense to Josh Hartnett. I like Josh Hartnett, but he can't carry a movie with any sort of depth or gravitas. You're supposed to believe that he's on a revenge kick. I don't believe that in the slightest throughout. I believe him to be a schmuck, but I don't believe him to have any sort of extra motivation to help drive the story forward. And with that, everything falls flat. The logic of the movie falls flat.
That's called the twist of the movie. You're not supposed to expect he has a ulterior motive until the end. He's supposed to play the schmuck. Like you said, everything. Josh Hartnett leads us with charm and grace, along with buoyed by everybody else in the movie, like Morgan Freeman, Ben Kingsley, Lucy Liu, and Stanley Tucci. Your movie, as you said, your movie does have Denzel, but Man of Fire would be unwatchable without Denzel. And it's actually almost literally unwatchable. This movie is Tony Scott left to his like worst impulses with like the editing, the color grading, making it almost impossible to see what's going on for a very long period of time. It's like this weird, hyper-realistic grittiness that like is trying to be like this, like, well, God forgive us for what I've done, or like I am the lost sheep sister. Like it's trying to be so deep and profound and unserious. I could totally see why it's tanked so much. My movie, yes, is an imitation of, it's trying to be and pays homage to North by Northwest and Pulp Fiction. And that's why it's at 52%, and it's a very fun 52% instead of a very poor and overly serious 32%, which is what yours is at.
Jacoby, I don't know what to say. When my movie has lines like "Some men are artists, for Creasy, death is his art, and he's about to paint his masterpiece," or "Forgiveness is between him and God, I'm just there to arrange the meeting," you're saying that something's supposed to be profound and thought-provoking from what's going on there. No, it's designed to let you know that Denzel's starting from a place at the bottom. He finds something to believe in, and then he goes on a revenge killing tour. And he does it in such unique ways with how he sticks a bomb up a dude's butt, how he tortures dudes for information, all throughout the course of moving through a scenario and an environment he's not used to. All of that is fun. What I'm saying to you in regards to Lucky Number 11, the conceit of the entire movie makes no sense. Why is it that Bruce Willis wants to go on a revenge tour with Josh Hartnett? I have no clue.
I have no. He doesn't want to kill a kid.
That's it. That's all we have to say about that.
what does that have to do with anything for this in terms of motivations for these characters? Your movie has Denzel Washington trying to avenge Dakota Fanning, who we as an audience know for at least half the movie. She's not dead. So what are we doing in terms of like
But he
motivations
doesn't
of
know
how
that.
the plot is sort of thing? But we do, and that makes it really boring to watch. like we're watching him go through this mission of like redemption and arc of to try to avenge this sort of death that we have, when we as an audience is not enjoying what's watching. My movie is enjoyable to watch because it's fun, it's quirky, it's out there. Bruce Willis's motivation, and along with Josh Hartnett's, is hidden until the end of the movie when it's revealed what their true motivation was, and it paints the whole movie differently, and in a still fun and rewatchable way, unlike your movie, which is not that in the slightest.
No, it paints Josh Hartnett's motivation. Everything to get Bruce Willis to set up to get him under his wing makes no sense. And you talked about your performances. Everything at the end, when we do the climax, especially when they're in the room with Ben Kingsley and Morgan Freeman, when they have to act dumbfounded, like they had no. These are people who ran criminal mastermind, like criminal organizations for 20 years, and they're bested by this schmucky kid and this old guy, and they're sitting there with the most dumbfounded looks for 10 minutes. It's terrible acting.
Because
there's a lot of terrible acting.
I'm not saying
a lot of terrible.
Sure, Denzel Washington is the best actor in any of our movies. I'm not going to debate that for everything, but everyone at least is in my movie having a good time and doing something fun and watchable that fits with the tone, while as opposed to Man on Fire and Denzel, who's just so dour and dark and depressing.
Okay, we're gonna go over to Robert. Robert, you have 1 minute when you start talking.
Jacoby's right. My movie does has the best actor. Denzel's doing as much with pathos, expressing as much as he can in a Denzel performance. This movie knows what it wants to be in the second half. It sets up the first half so that you understand that Denzel's going through something, and then the second half is really where it takes off. It's very stylistically interesting with how it cuts back and forth and how it does the visuals. But the main purpose is that those lines that I said, it knows what kind of movie it wants to be. It excels at it, makes it badass. There's thematic elements. You see some emotional states of characters that's a little frenetic and hopeless. Those things in the visuals help you understand sort of the feelings of what's going on with the character. With Lucky Number 11, is it fun? A little bit. But there's a lot of leaps of logic. There's a lot of issues with the performances. I don't understand how it is that we got to the point that we do. It wants you to believe that it's slicker and more agile. It is. It's bogged down by a lot of plot holes, very bad acting choices, the range of the main character, how the movie is driven. All of that suffers with what's going on with Lucky Number 11. Man on Fire doesn't suffer from those things. It knows what it is.
Okay, we're going to go over to Mr. Bancroft. You have 1 minute when you start talking.
Man on Fire is so trying to be this like 85 to 90% rating serious deep crime movie with all those lines that Robert said, like it's trying to be super serious, but it tilts way too far to dour and cynicism and some leaks of logic, but fails spectacularly at it. So it's not surprising that it's 39% because it's just so it's a bog to watch. It's a drag to watch. And that 39% is probably only because of Denzel. I'm not taking anything away from his great performance in that. But Lucky Number 11 sits pretty at 52% and does not try to be anything more than 52%. It tries to pay homage to North by Northwest and Pulp Fiction and still succeeds in having a fun time. And I think that's what makes it a better movie. It knows that it's silly, unlike Man on Fire, which does not know anything of what it's trying to do. It has a stellar cast that's not just anchored by one person like Denzel Washington. You have Ben Kingsley, Morgan Freeman, Bruce Willis, Stanley Tucci, Josh Hartnett, and Lucy Liu, who all give fun performances that fit exactly with what the movie is trying to be. Unlike Man of Fire, mine has an actually enjoyable twist that recontextualizes everything and still remains fun throughout.
Okay. All right. Let's bring in the judges. Mr. Michaels, Mr. Menchaca. All right. Brian, you're kicking us off.
first, I just want to say I find it ironic that you always used to hate me using stats and numbers and data in my debates, and here you are now writing questions about them. So just saying. There's that. Yeah, this is an interesting one. I went with Robert on this one. I felt like he did a better job of really supporting his movie. I know, like Jacoby tried to attack it, talking about like, well, if your movie didn't have Denzel, then it wouldn't be anything. And then Robert, in his closing, said, "Yeah, but it has Denzel." It's like, why would you take out the best thing about it? I really thought, even in the opening, I kind of saw where this was going, because Jacoby is talking about how, his movie, I think he said, is it worth more than 60%? Probably not. Whereas Robert was saying, how Rotten Tomatoes is messed up, his deserves to be much higher. And I was just thinking, if Jacoby doesn't even believe his deserves to be higher than 60%, then why should I? So for me, I think the person who supported their movie as which was the better movie was Robert.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I concur. We went with RC Cola on this one.
Sick. Real crowd.
Yeah, listen, I gotta be frank, at least with the audience and the competitors here. Sometimes these matches, these points come down to who made me laugh the most. And I feel like as the fight went along, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, Robert is right. Like, Man on Fire, I think, is a good movie. Should be, more highly regarded movie on Rotten Tomatoes. And as the fight went along, and I heard, Jacoby talk about Lucky Number 11, it's like, yeah, I can believe this is lower than 60%. It does not sound like a particularly great film. And like Robert, I think, pointed out a number of points that made the movie sound dumb. So like that is pretty simple for me on that one. Of okay, like Robert got the point in that one.
My vote doesn't count. I went with Jacoby. And so it's funny. On the last one, Brian brought up a lot of points that I was like, I maybe should have voted for Jacoby. You guys just brought up a lot of stuff where I was like, maybe I should have voted for Robert.
Go with your gut, Tim.
Yeah.
That's what I did. And so the reason why I went with Jacoby ultimately was he convinced me why. And to be clear, I've seen both these films. And I actually really like Man on Fire. I think that movie's awesome. I think Lucky Number 11 is kind of stupid. But Jacoby convinced me why Lucky Number 11 is a fun diet Tarantino movie. And Robert brought that up as like a bad thing. Jacoby made me feel like it was a good thing. And that it was a fun movie, entertaining, and enjoyable to watch. And he convinced me that Man on Fire is boring. He brought up the fact that, the whole, sorry, Maggie is standing here giving me weird looks. He brought up the whole thing about how, like, there are things that the audience knows that the characters in the film doesn't know, and that brings the film down. But ultimately, I thought Jacoby just made me want to watch a more fun, entertaining movie, making it the best. Though I don't necessarily agree personally. That's how I felt in the argument. But Mark and Brian said a lot of stuff that I actually, is probably great. Yeah. So anyway, Robert gets the point. It is 2-1, and we are going to get into the final prep question. So Robert needs to hit this in order to send it to the bonus. The question was drafted by Robert in the category of Galaxy Quests. Your question is, what is the best scene in a Galaxy Quests film? Robert, because you drafted it, you're going first. You have 1 minute when you start talking.
Picking a best scene from all the intense and provocative options in Galaxy Quests is like trying to determine if you like eating, drinking, or breathing better in life. There's so many choices, and they're vital and inherent state of what makes these films iconic. So for me, there isn't a better scene that's attempted to be copied over time, like the climax in Star Wars: A New Hope, the trench run where Luke shoots the proton torpedoes into the Death Star and explodes it. At that point, we've had 10 minutes of lows for the Rebel Alliance. They're being picked apart. It seems like they're on their last legs. The brilliance is the feelings of despair and tension that's built into the scene because everything's on a ticking clock. We have the ticking clock of the Death Star coming to the Yavin base. We have the ticking clock of the distance as they try to move along the trench. And despite the fact that it's a space battle, it feels very intimate, closed, claustrophobic. So it plays through all these different things. It's also the most microcosm of good triumphing over evil you could see in a blockbuster movie. When Luke shoots and explodes the Death Star, everything seems to be in despair, and then we're given a sense of pride and hope and thoughtfulness, and it's all done within the trench.
Okay. Let's go over to Jacoby. Jacoby, you have 1 minute when you start talking.
The OG chestburster scene in Alien, I think, is the best scene in a Galaxy Quest film. It's one of the most disturbing, like mainstream gory moments in movie monster history, and it's like the birth of one of the best movie monsters I think of like all time. But the scene itself actually has way more going on than just an alien bursting out of a chest. You have the dread that something terrible is going to happen, which is done so effectively. You have all these characters who feel so real, just like talking with each other and hanging out, and it captures the mood perfectly. You have the stinker android Ash just suspiciously waiting for what's about to happen, and then you have the moment itself. It happens quicker than you remember, but you never forget it, because you never forget just how horrible it is to watch an alien burst out of a chest like that. And we all, like, you know, I think we all know the story probably. The cast didn't know how big it was going to be, so the reactions to the chestburster scene are genuinely freaked out. It's real, it's visceral, it's terrifying, and it's just masterful in how it creates one of the most iconic scenes and monster moments ever. Both for the big and the small moments, it's successful and the best.
Time. Okay. Guys, these are two really good scenes. All right. 5 minute freeform and one of you starts.
Jacoby, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Alien's my favorite Alien movie. So you mentioned like a sense of dread. I think there's a problem with that dread. The thing is, I don't think it gets a chance to linger as long as it should because of the note of the incubation period of the aliens. I think it has to go quick, and as a result, we don't get to sit and stew in that as long as we would like. I think there's a little, like, this scene has already happened technically. When we first get on the Nostromo, they're sitting around and they're doing their conversational thing, which makes it feel lived in. So it kind of feels like a retread of the beginning part of that. And then there's a bit of a haminess with what John Hurt does leading to the chest burster. And then the thing that I despise the most is once it gets out of the chest, the alien moving across the table, it is very terribly visual. It's a very terrible visual thing. It's like Jason Goes to Hell. It's the same sort of demon type of thing.
I mean, we're arguing both 70s movies here, so yours is a space opera, mine's like a puppet sort of thing. Like, we shouldn't be arguing the how things look, because both of ours kind of look a little bit bad, but that's okay. You say it's that the lingers, it shouldn't linger as long. It should linger longer than what it should. I disagree with that, because then it comes almost out of nowhere. Everything seems to be fine, that we do expect something bad to happen because of that beginning scene where we know something terrible has infected this, and we're like wondering, like, what's happened? Is he fine? Is this okay? Because of that first scene, it makes this scene so much more impactful, so much more effective, so much more everything, so that when it does happen, almost instantaneously, everybody is thrown to a loop. And that's why it sticks with us for so long, because it is so scary, because it is so real and in that moment. If we go back to like the despair of the scene of not letting it sit, I actually think the despair, which is one of your points of the trench run, is the worst part of your thing. Nobody seems to care that the Death Star is about to blow up Leia and everybody on the thing. Nobody seems to be panicking that they're like a second away from that whole planet being exploded. The first trench run fails and they're like, damn, we missed. I was like, all right, I better try again. And so everything like that. I feel like your emotions for all the actors in your scene do not fit well in terms of like, because probably everything is so close, as you mentioned, as opposed to mine, which is like the fear, you feel it way more palpable than your scene.
I mean, at that point, like I said, everything's been like, everything's getting destroyed. Everything's being cut up. You feel like this is the last ditch effort. If something goes wrong, everything's going to be ruined for the rebellion. And I mean, we had the reunion with Luke and Biggs, and they don't get a chance to share their stories because Biggs gets killed. And
not Biggs.
Yeah, hold on, Jacoby. Biggs is an important part of getting Luke motivation to get off the planet. All right, calm down. All right, it's important for this. Like he can't react to it as much because he's in the midst of the shit, but it's important for that. R2 gets shot. We don't know what's going to happen with R2. Like, that's important, and people feel like bad about what's going to happen there. And then honestly, the first time you watch the trench scene without knowing that Han Solo is going to come in, when Han Solo comes in right before Luke is about to get blasted, like, there's no greater sense of relief and grandiose, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're going to win this, than when that happens. And then every subsequent viewing from there, then you're waiting for it to happen because you get redemptive arc for Han Solo, which you've been waiting for the whole movie. So it's a big scene, bombastic scene, but it's also very intimate with regards to character moments for people like Han Solo.
I believe in your first part, why I bash on Briggs, because it's so random that a big emotional crux of the trench scene to try to get some emotion out of it is a character who we met just like 3 seconds earlier, which is, I think, totally undercuts that scene. It's like, oh no, not Briggs who died, not a character we just met. It's like, hey, Luke, let's see that everything. It doesn't, it's adding stakes to the scene when everything is like, when it needs a little bit more from that. You say like the anticipation of waiting for Han Solo to come in and swoop in and save the day is like one of the key moments of that. But I actually think the anticipation of waiting for a big monster to burst out of a chest in the original scene is better use of anticipation and dread than whatever is happening with the trench run itself. Both of our scenes deal with anticipation of what's going to happen and how they'll win. And in mine, you're wondering what like the heck is going to happen to John Hurt. And I think that terror and tension and fear is top notch in mine, while your resolution and outcome is just like kind of slightly above average. So I think that mine does your anticipation part better.
But I don't think it does the payoff quite as well as I mentioned with what happens at the end. And also with regards to like horror and stuff, even just an Alien, I think there's things that are scarier when the xenomorph is fully developed. I think there's a more intense, again, claustrophobic feel of like when Dallas gets taken in the vents and we don't see what's happening until the very end. Like, I think that's scarier. And then with regards to like a twist of what's going to happen, I think the anticipation of what happens and the payoff with Ash turning out to be an android is much more satisfying than what happens with the chestburster, again, because we don't get to sit with it as much and understand really what happens. It happens, he bursts out, and then, then we have to go from there. So I think there's actually better parts that play into anticipation and dread and terror further throughout Alien than just the chestbursters.
But I think mine is like the start of that. It's the start of something crazy and getting these characters into something so crazy and insane and horrible and so masterful because it happens just like that. Yes, my scene is not as triumphant as yours because yours is the ending of the movie. Mine is the start of the movie. Mine is the birth of a monster for everything. Yours is the result, the win, everybody's happy. Mine just creates an oh shit moment of like, what is loose upon the ship and what is it going to do to us? And I think as a scene, that is just a little bit more effective than as opposed to the ending of good guys saving the day at the end of it.
But I think there's a lot of emotional resonance with what happens, not just with it goes from a big low to a big high. And I don't think you usually get that in climactic battles.
For the record, gave you guys an extra minute because that was kooky. We are going to start. That was very good. I've done that before. Don't worry. Okay. We're going to go to Jacoby first. Jacoby, you get 1 minute when you start talking.
Alien created an all-time movie monster with my scene. Star Wars gave us a rousing finale to its first chapter. Both are good and they're so different, but mine is better because I think the highs of my scene are like all highs, where I think the trench run scene is a little bit overrated and runs off like kind of like vibes more than like actual quality. Vibes are not bad, but I think the best should have more. There's so much like wrong with the trench run scene when you break it down. I just think the emotional performances that Robert's kind of attacking mine for and celebrating for his, I don't think are there. I think everyone is pretty laissez-faire about the Death Star coming to blow up everything, as opposed to mine where like everyone's like, oh my God, like what is happening here? What is this thing? So like mine is perfect, not only for its like big chest bursting moments, but also for the anticipation and the dread the scene leading up to it. And then everything does happen so quickly. I know Robert's saying like it should linger longer. I don't think it should at all. It is perfect the way it is because you expect something to happen and all of a sudden things just explode and everything goes crazy and everyone's reaction is so real and raw, and a movie monster is born that will change the face of cinema forever, and it all starts with the scene.
Okay, we're going to go over to Robert. Robert, you have 1 minute when you start talking.
Through the trench run, we get drama, action, tension, despair, heartache, unease, hopefulness, and relief, all within a 4-minute scene of ships flying down a hallway. Because of how everything's built to that moment, even the previous 10 minutes of what's going on in the battle, the twists and turns, how it ends up being one of the greatest tellings of good triumphing over evil. Spirit, many have tried to capture, none have had. The fact that it's the climax of the movie is incredible. We didn't bring up Obi-Wan Kenobi coming back from the dead and spurning Luke on and making us realize what kind of person, what kind of force-sensitive person Luke can be, all built within the course of that 4 minutes. You can't argue with the impact of the chestburster scene for sci-fi horror, but if you look at it, there are cracks in the armor, how it's composed, how things were refined and then redone in the future with other chestburster scenes, done with better technology, obviously, and the tension that we're not allowed to sit in, scarier moments that are done throughout Alien, more tension-filled, adequately done, better, going throughout what's happening. The small alien looks cool in the chest, but not when it comes out. Again, a lot of visual cracks, a lot of things that don't add up.
Okay. Wow. All right. We're going to bring in the judges.
Hey, Jacoby. Good
Yeah.
debates. Good debates.
Good debates. That was good.
Yeah. I told a mutual friend of ours that I was sad because Jacoby basically took my 1Bs or 2s for everything I was thinking, which made it very difficult to argue against them.
All right. Mark looks ready. Brian, how are you doing? Okay. Yeah, this was great. 2 really good scenes, 2 great films. One, Jacoby kind of went to it from like the scene is so shocking, and visceral. It creates a movie monster. Robert went from it's the triumphant triumph of the heroes. So they're different types of scenes, both 70s sci-fi. At one point, Jacoby said, ultimately, I went with Robbie Casts. I think Robert convinced me of why, when you look at it on paper, ships going down a hallway was a really good line. It's mundane on paper, but in reality, it's super exciting because of all of the setup. And first, it's hard because these movies have lived in our brains rent-free for so many years, that almost before you even see them, you kind of know these scenes already. But that prior, if you're watching it for the first time, like Han Solo coming in and getting that redemption, all of these things like combine, Obi-Wan coming in and from the dead and telling Luke to go on and use the Force, like all those things are really strong. Jacoby did a great job with the Alien. Frankly, fantastic on talking about why the scene was great, bringing up the point of the crew, not the reality of the actors not knowing. I think that was all helpful. I thought Robert, though, was able to bring up other scenes from Alien that were more tense, more interesting, that were both visually and more horroristically interesting. This was really close. I think both just did a really good job, but Robert had the edge for me, kind of talking about just the massive scale of the scene and why it was so exciting and the best. So, Brian, you've seen these movies.
I saw these movies. I think both of them in the 70s. So, yeah. I don't know how you guys picked such shit movies when AVP Requiem was sitting right there. No.
Yeah, guys.
No, you're killing me here because these are 2 of the true sci-fi classics. Well, some people would say fantasy for Star Wars, but they're 2 of the sci-fi fantasy classics of all time, and so it's really hard to argue against either of them. So I pity both of you for that one. Although I am surprised that Jacoby did not address the fact that Star Wars Trench Run is just a ripoff of Top Gun Maverick. Just saying. I'm just saying they have time travel, don't they? No. It was a very interesting argument because I think it was Jacoby, that pointed out that, one of them is talking about like the beginning of the movie, this birth of this monster, and the other person's talking about the end of their movie, the climax of it. You're trying to compare these two to very different points, even in their own film. So again, it's another way it's kind of hard to put against each other. I think what clinched it for me, I did vote for Jacoby on this one. So Mark, you're gonna have to make this decision. I think what clinched it for me is when Jacoby started addressing kind of the emotions of the thing. When you talk about the people on, like, when they every time they cut back to Yavin, or even the pilots, they kind of seem like, oh darn, I missed. I'll try again. And nobody, as much as you talk about the tension, we know what the stakes are. The characters in the scenes did not seem to be conveying kind of that same terror, that same utility, whatever. Whereas in his, the horror on their faces and everything was really evident on their faces, and it was really an impactful scene to kick off basically the action of his film. So while they're both probably the two best choices you could have picked, I went with Jacoby.
I mean, but again, you forgot about the birth of the Pred alien.
Yeah.
Mark, you're deciding this one. Are we done, or are we moving to a bonus?
You're muted, but we saw that.
Yeah, we're done. They were good at building up, and I was muted for that one, so it's even better for that. I very much agree with what Brian said. He kind of took a lot
about AVP Requiem.
Sure. I kind of agreed a lot. Like Jacoby brought up multiple points where it's like, like Robert brought up, like, hey, these are big moments for these guys, and like Jacoby was like, yeah, I don't think these guys know it's like big moments for these guys. And he brought up that guy who's supposedly like a big moment for Luke. I don't even remember his name, honestly. Like, kind of shows like how important that guy who died is. Like, so whatever. But yeah, I feel like Robert brought up the correct scene in this one, brought up the right points. I think, Jacoby brought up the correct scene in this one. I think Robert kind of fought it as best he could on it, but yeah, Jacoby was just really on the offensive on this one.
Okay, well, that means your winner is Jacoby Bancroft. We are going to move to post-match interviews. We're going to start with talking to Robert. Robert,
yeah,
that's a tough one, man. I'm sorry. But I think you played really well. I don't think there was a fight that necessarily was even in the one that was a clean sweep. I don't think it was necessarily like you played bad by any means. I said it recently in a match, but in a match that aired earlier this season. It sucks when someone is this good, but there's got to be a winner, and and both of you can't move on and can't win. It just sucks because you played really great, and it just didn't go your way today. How are we feeling after this one?
This went pretty similarly to the last one. I was down 2-0. I had to win the third point by split. I think the last time Jacoby swept the last question, and I at least got a vote here. Yeah, I mean, I like to think I'm good at it, but I have a losing record now. Unfortunately, because I keep getting
that's not true. You are even. You were 500.
Oh, are you sure? I'm pretty sure I'm under 500, but that's whatever. I'll trust the historian.
You're 6-6, my friend.
Oh, okay, well, even so, yeah, I just keep getting my butt kicked this year. I'm trying really hard. I promise. It's just, I guess my points aren't as salient as I believe them to be when I jot them down. But kudos to Jacoby. He's a master at this. I'm still working at it as hard as I can. I work at this as hard as I work on any trivia thing. So kudos to him. I hope he gets to make it far, and I hope he gets to bring him a belt.
Robert, you've been a big help to this game in 2025. You've become a judge in this game, which I think has kind of helped shape your arguments a little bit even better. It hasn't necessarily come to fruition in the record that I think, like you were saying, but I think there's nowhere else to go but up. And frankly, you've been playing a lot of really good players this season. You've had to play Rue, you've had to play Joe, Jacoby. Like these are top tier players, as I believe, frankly, you are as well. So you've had a tough season, but I think a strong one nonetheless from the playing perspective. The record might just not reflect it, but I'm looking forward to seeing what you do in 2026 because this does unfortunately end your season in Fanzone. But I look forward to seeing you come back as a player next year, and we love having you here as a judge. So thank you, Robert, for being here, and we will see you next time, whether that's as a judge or as a player. So we'll bring in our winner today, Mr. Jacoby Bancroft. Jacoby, as I meant every word that I said to Robert. I think you played fantastic. I feel bad because I don't like seeing my friends lose and also people who play well lose. But that being said, it's got to feel pretty good to win after the knockout. It's got to feel pretty redemptive. You played great. You had a fantastic match against Robert, and it's just got to feel pretty awesome coming after that knockout. How are you feeling?
Yeah, no, it does feel great. It's just I remember that Nazario match because like I remember that match in particular. Like it didn't even feel like I thought I came out of the Nazario match saying like, oh, I thought all my picks were good. I thought I would get at least like one of these. And when I'm to not get any of them, I think like, is my whole picking system sort of wrong here? Like, and like, is everything like going to shit here? But like, no. So it was very exhilarating and felt very good to get this win at the cost of Robert, my friend, who had to lose. Which, and again, I think as you kind of said it too, I hearing this match, I thought all the questions were very like equally, except for that man on fire. He did trounce me on that one, but like the other ones, like felt like they were the best picks. They were everything that all the arguments that needed to be made about all these characters were the ones that needed to be made. And then sometimes that's just like how it goes. So I'm sorry for that loss for him. He's great at this. The way that he prepares and like listening to like how he forms his arguments is great. He's one of my favorites to watch and listen to because he is very articulate and everything. But and then on the flip side, I am happy to win. So it was a good time. I tried not to get too overheated. I did not want to be too insane, Mark. I wanted to be very calm in this one. And I think there was only a few times where I got a little exaggerated. But I tried to keep it concise, locked in, for all that stuff. And it was. So yes, it was a good time. And yes.
Okay, Jacoby, because you've won this match, you have earned yourself, another one.
Great.
You are going to be playing another person. I'm going to tell you your options. We have not shot the match yet, so we don't know who you're going to play. Oh, no, wait, I lied. We totally have shot the match yet. It just hasn't aired yet. So, I don't know. You're going to be playing the winner of Alex Martinez and Adelaide Spence.
Oh.
Thoughts?
I have debated Spence twice, I think already. But I haven't debated. Yeah, this year. So I'm always, on the hunt for something new. So I don't think I've ever debated Alex, but either one is going to be a fun time. If it is Spence again, Spence always has wild picks that I love, that it's always fun to argue against. And then Alex would represent a new thing. So either way, it's going to be exciting.
Jacoby, I look forward to it. Can't wait to see what happens in that one. Congrats on the win. We will see you in that next match. But let's get final thoughts, starting with Mr. Menchaca. Mark, thoughts on the match?
Yeah, no, this was I think it was a solid showing from both competitors. I like what Robert did here. Just kind of came up short end a little bit here. Hopefully come bounce back, play kind of next year. I'm sure he will. Because he definitely entered into that next level competitor. It's always fun to watch Jacoby work and like see him go into the next match. Sorry, but like whoever you end up playing the next match is, but like the little crazy side, is probably going to come out in the next match, most likely. Yeah, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, Brian, instead of asking you your thoughts on the match, I want to ask you, what would you rather see? Would you rather see Jacoby go up against Spence a third time, or do you want to see him take on Alex?
Well, I feel like they're both could be fun matches, but honestly, and now if I happen to be there judging them, I will obviously judge by the debate. But just seeing what Jacoby can do, I feel like either one is the squash match. I feel like Jacoby will demolish either one of them if I had to guess. I think the versus Adelaide could be probably the more fun of the two, but as Jacoby said, it's kind of fun to see something new and different. So if I had to pick, if I'm setting up matches and if it wasn't based on wins and losses, I would probably go with Alex.
Awesome. All right, well, that's going to do it for us today at Fanzone Debate. Thank you so much to the players, Robert and Jacoby and Brian and Mark, for judging this one. Thank you to everyone who helps make this show run, your Brians and Marks, your Kirks, your Nicks. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. Next week, we have another match in this title picture. We got Javi Madden going up against Jack Pinchuk, my living nightmare. I mean, Jack, I love you. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you real soon with that next one. Until then, bye.
There we go. Thanks a lot. Come again.
Hey, I won't forget what you've done for me here today.
I would prefer that you do.